Somewhere in East Africa, inside a monastery carved from ancient stone, monks in white robes, copy by hand, a text the world has almost forgotten. Candles flicker gently in the night breeze. The parchment absorbs the ink with the same reverence it did 1,000 years ago. They are not copying 66 books, not 73. They are copying 81, and they have been doing so for more than 17 centuries, without stopping even once. There is a Bible that most of the world's Christians have never read, not because it was destroyed, not because it was banned, but because the world simply did not know it existed. It contains books that speak of angels who descended to earth and married women, books that reveal the names of demons, books that narrate the sacred fate of the Ark of the Covenant after the destruction of Jerusalem, books that change everything you thought you knew. This Bible is not an archaeological curiosity kept under glass in some European museum. It is read every Sunday by more than 50 million faithful Christians. It is sung in liturgies that date back to the 4th century. It is defended by a tradition that existed before Rome made Christianity the official religion of the empire. It is the Bible of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, the oldest Christian institution still in full operation anywhere in the world. Why does the world not know these 81 books? The answer lies in councils held behind closed doors, in wars that destroyed trade routes, and in decisions made by powerful men who chose what billions of people would read for the next 2,000 years. But in Ethiopia, those choices were never accepted. The Ethiopians kept what others discarded, with a faithfulness that defies any comparison across the entire span of recorded human history. Imagine discovering that the Apostle Jude quoted word for word from a book that was removed from your Bible, that Jesus and his disciples knew texts that never reached your hands, that entire passages in Revelation and Ezekiel only make full sense in light of an Ethiopian text 2,000 years old. This is not conspiracy theory. It is written, documented, and verified by scholars. And the Ethiopians never stopped reading these sacred texts, not once. The dense fragrance of incense fills the monastery air. A monk of 80 years murmurs verses in Ge'ez, the liturgical language of Ethiopia, as ancient as ecclesiastical Latin, as sacred as biblical Hebrew. He speaks neither English nor any modern tongue, but he knows by heart entire pages of the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and the Kebra Nagast, books that, to him, are simply the Bible, the only Bible he has known in his entire life. To understand the Ethiopian Bible, you must go back in time, not only to the Protestant Reformation of the 16th century, not to the Council of Nicaea in the 4th. You must go much deeper, to a powerful African kingdom that the Persian prophet Mani placed alongside Rome, Persia, and China as one of the 4 great powers of the ancient world. That kingdom was called Aksum, and it changed the history of Christianity in Africa forever. This is the story of a church that survived invasions, bloody wars, centuries of forced isolation, and the indifference of the Western world. A church that carried in its arms texts that others threw away. A church that believes it guards, inside a small stone chapel in the city of Aksum, the very Ark of the Covenant of Moses. Prepare yourself. What you are about to discover will forever expand what you understand about Christian faith. The 3rd century after Christ, the world was divided among 4 empires that controlled the fate of human civilization. On one side, Rome, with its legions and its emperors. On the other, the Sassanid Persia. To the distant east, the vast empire of China. And on the Horn of Africa, a force that few today would recognize by name, the Kingdom of Aksum in the highlands of present-day Ethiopia, powerful and profoundly mysterious. The Kingdom of Aksum was not an isolated tribe on the margins of history. It was a superpower with a naval fleet on the Red Sea, control of the spice routes between the Mediterranean and India, and stone monuments that rivaled the Egyptian obelisks. The king Mani, founder of Manichaeism, recorded, "There are 4 great kingdoms in the world: Rome, Persia, Aksum, and China," in that exact order. Aksum was the 4th power of the ancient world. It was in this powerful kingdom that Christianity arrived in an extraordinary way. Around the year 316, a Christian philosopher from Tyre named Meropius was sailing the Red Sea with his 2 nephews, Frumentius and Aedesius. When the ship anchored for provisions, a local tribe attacked the vessel. Meropius died. The 2 young men were captured and taken as slaves to the royal court of Aksum, where everything was about to change. Frumentius and Aedesius were young, cultured, and extraordinarily intelligent. The king of Aksum soon recognized their value. Over time, the 2 former slaves rose through the court hierarchy. Aedesius became the king's cupbearer and Frumentius his secretary and treasurer. When the king died, the queen asked both to remain and help govern during the minority of the princes, Ezana and Seazana, 2 Christian slaves shaping the future of an entire empire. During the years he served at court, Frumentius quietly opened space for Christian merchants to gather and pray. He did not impose the faith. He simply created conditions for it to flourish. When he received permission to leave, Frumentius did not go straight home. He went to Alexandria, where he found Athanasius, the great bishop who had defended the divinity of Christ at Nicaea, the man who would change the destiny of Ethiopia forever. Frumentius told Athanasius everything: the openness at the Aksumite court, the Christian merchants who prayed in silence, the historic opportunity. Athanasius made a surprising decision. He consecrated Frumentius himself as the first bishop of Aksum. It was the year 328. Frumentius returned to Ethiopia with title and mission. The Ethiopians called him Abba Salama, Father of Peace, and African Christianity truly began. Prince Ezana had grown up under the quiet influence of these 2 men. When he became king, he received baptism at the hands of Frumentius. What happened next was absolutely unprecedented. Around the year 330, Ezana declared Christianity the official religion of the Kingdom of Aksum. 50 years before Rome did the same. Aksum was the 2nd Christian state in world history after Armenia, and the first anywhere on the African continent. King Ezana's conversion was not merely political, it transformed the very visual identity of the kingdom. The coins of Aksum, which had carried the symbol of the crescent moon, now bore the Christian cross struck into the metal. Stone inscriptions celebrating military victories began to glorify the Christian God. The most powerful kingdom in Africa had changed its soul, and it engraved that permanent change into the very currency circulating across the empire. The faith had reached power, but the sacred texts still needed to be translated. For more than a century after Ezana's conversion, the Bible remained in Greek, accessible only to the literate elite. Then a new wave arrived in Ethiopia, not of soldiers, not of merchants, but of 9 monks who came from afar carrying something more valuable than all the gold in the kingdom: sacred manuscripts and the knowledge required to translate every single word of them. Around the year 480 after Christ, there arrived in Ethiopia those whom tradition calls the 9 saints. They were Syrian monks who had fled the theological disputes of the Mediterranean following the Council of Chalcedon. Each came from a different monastic tradition, some from Syria, others from Constantinople, others from Egypt. And each brought sacred texts from his tradition of origin, texts that existed in no other language except Ge'ez. The 9 saints learned Ge'ez and spread across the regions of the kingdom, founding monasteries wherever they arrived. For more than 50 years, they worked on the greatest task of their generation: the complete translation of the scriptures into Ge'ez. But they did not translate only the books Rome had approved. They translated everything their traditions considered sacred, including texts the West was gradually ignoring and setting aside. Among the texts the 9 saints brought were the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and the Paralipomena of Jeremiah, writings that had circulated in 2nd and 3rd century Christian communities but were being marginalized in debates about the official canon. In Ethiopia, these texts received exactly the same reverence as the Gospels. They were copied with the same care and sung with the same devotion, and so they entered the Ethiopian Bible forever. While the 9 saints were at work, the Christian world debated which texts were sacred. In 397, at the Council of Carthage, the bishops of the West defined the Old Testament canon. Some books were included, others were excluded, not because they were proven false, but because there was pressure for uniformity, and uniformity demands painful cuts. Ethiopia did not participate in that council. Its decisions were never binding for the Church of Aksum. The Council of Carthage took place at an impossible distance from Aksum, geographically and culturally. The kingdom was at the height of its commercial power, with trade routes covering the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean. Ethiopian bishops did not cross the Mediterranean to sit in Roman councils. The decision about the canon was made without them and without their texts. When the Western world closed its list of sacred books, Ethiopia simply kept reading what it always had. The most dramatic cut came in 451 at the Council of Chalcedon. The central question was theological. Did Christ have one nature or two? Rome and Constantinople insisted on 2 natures, human and divine, in one person. Coptic Egypt and Ethiopia disagreed. For them, Christ had a single unified nature, bound together by the mystery of the Incarnation. This theological difference would create a separation that endures to the present day. After Chalcedon, the Ethiopian Church followed its own path with determination. In Ethiopian eyes, this was not heresy. It was a distinct theological position called miaphysitism, different from what Rome called monophysitism. The separation meant centuries of isolation from Western Christendom, but that isolation had an unexpected consequence. Ethiopia preserved its biblical tradition intact, free from the pressures of uniformity that shaped the West through the entire European Middle Ages. With isolation came a singular freedom. The Ethiopian Church did not need to justify its 81 books before Rome or Constantinople. It did not need to explain why it still read Enoch, while the Latins had long since stopped. It did not need to defend the Kebra Nagast or the Maccabean. It simply read, copied, sang, and preached these texts across generations, inside stone monasteries, on mountains, and on lake islands reachable only by boat, far from the world. The 7th century brought a new and devastating challenge: the advance of Islam across North Africa and the Middle East. The rich trade routes of Aksum were severed. The once powerful empire contracted, but the monasteries held. Monks hid manuscripts in caves during centuries of instability. Some wrapped them in animal hide, others buried them in secret locations. When the danger passed, the texts were unearthed, and the careful work of copying began again. Ethiopian monasteries became fortresses of sacred knowledge. The monastery of Debre Damo, built in the 6th century, sits atop a cliff of 15 meters of sheer vertical rock, accessible only by a rope braided from cowhide. There, untouched by centuries of wars and invasions, manuscripts of incalculable value lie sleeping. Monks ascend and descend by that rope every day, as if God himself had designed that inaccessibility as a form of providential protection. On Lake Tana, the largest lake in Ethiopia, there are 19 monasteries scattered across islands and peninsulas that dot the dark waters. Some date from the 14th century, others possibly trace back to the 3rd. For centuries, the water served as the most effective of shields. To reach these monasteries, a boat was required, and the monks controlled the boats. The manuscripts sleeping on those islands have never been fully photographed by any outside scholar. The relationship between Ethiopia and the Old Testament is deeper than in any other Christian people. The Ethiopians did not merely read the Old Testament, they lived it entirely. Circumcision is practiced as a sacred rite. The Sabbath is observed alongside the Christian Sunday. The dietary laws of Leviticus are followed with rigor. The priests wear vestments that faithfully echo the descriptions of Exodus. Judaism and Christianity never fully separated in this singular place. This extraordinary connection to the Old Testament has an explanation that goes beyond theology. It has to do with a story the Ethiopians have told with pride for 3,000 years. A story of a queen, a wise king, a son who carried a monumental inheritance, and a sacred object that crossed the Red Sea and never returned to Israel. It is the founding story of the Ethiopian nation. The Kebra Nagas tells it with unparalleled richness and depth. Before diving into the books, it is essential to understand what this church is. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is not a fringe sect of the Christian faith. It is one of the largest Christian churches in the world, with more than 50 million faithful. It is older than the Roman Church as an organized institution. Its bishops carry an unbroken line of ordination reaching back to the 4th century, before any pope exercised universal authority over all of Christendom. The word Tewahedo in Ge'ez means unified, referring to the belief that the human and divine natures of Christ were joined into a single, indivisible reality. This is not a denial of either Jesus' humanity or his divinity. It is an affirmation that the Incarnation created something new, a reality that transcends any division. It is a sophisticated theological position condemned as heresy by Western councils, yet professed with unshakable conviction by 50 million Ethiopians. While medieval Europe barely knew a Christian Ethiopia existed, Ethiopian emperors exchanged letters with kings of Jerusalem, funded monasteries on Mount Sinai, and sent monks to the Holy Land. An Ethiopian community had existed in Jerusalem since the 4th century. Ethiopia was never isolated from Christianity. It was isolated from Roman and Latin Christendom, and the West confused the two for centuries. Both sides paid a heavy price for that historic confusion. In the 12th century, King Lalibela ordered 11 churches to be carved directly into the volcanic rock of Ethiopia's northern mountains. Each was cut from the top downward, the surrounding rock removed with patience, the interior excavated with precision, the walls shaped until naves, altars, and secret chambers emerged. Some are connected by underground passages. Lalibela called his monumental work the New Jerusalem of Africa, and the name endures. The churches of Lalibela still function as living centers of worship. Every year at Timkat, the Ethiopian Epiphany, crowds of pilgrims climb the mountains for liturgies inside these stone churches, which have seen nearly 900 years of continuous use. Priests wear hand-embroidered golden and red tunics. Chants in Ge'ez echo through sculpted stone corridors. And the text guiding every ceremony always comes from the Bible of 81 books, as it always has. Now it is time to open the books the West left behind. The first and most remarkable of them is the Book of Enoch, called Enoch in Ge'ez. It takes its name from the man who, according to Genesis, walked with God and was no more, because God took him. Enoch did not die like the others. He was simply taken into the divine presence, and what he witnessed before departing was carefully recorded in a text the Ethiopians have never stopped reading. The Book of Enoch is divided into 5 major sections, each revealing a different dimension of heavenly secrets. The first, and the most widely known in the world, is the Book of the Watchers. a narration of the events that preceded Noah's flood. The Watchers were angels assigned by God to guard humanity. But something went profoundly wrong. 200 of them looked upon the daughters of men and felt a desire they were never meant to feel. The leader of the fallen angels was called Semyaza. He gathered the 200 on the summit of Mount Hermon, and there they made an oath. They would descend together, take wives among human women, and face the consequences collectively. The text lists the names of their chiefs, Azazel, Sariel, Rakael, each with his specialty in the corruption of humanity. Azazel taught men to forge weapons of war. Others taught forbidden enchantments and seduction. From the unions between the Watchers and human women were born the Nephilim, giants of extraordinary proportions and destructive appetites. The text describes creatures that consumed everything the earth produced and, when food was exhausted, turned with violence against the humans themselves. The wickedness that Genesis mentions before the flood, great was the evil of man on the earth, the Book of Enoch explains with detail the Ethiopians read for 2 millennia. When the cry of humanity reached the heavens, 4 archangels interceded: Michael, Raphael, Uriel, and Gabriel. Each received a mission. Raphael was tasked with binding Azazel hand and foot and casting him into a dark pit in the desert. Michael was to punish Semyaza. Gabriel received the order to turn the sons of the Watchers against each other, and Uriel was sent with urgency to warn Noah about the flood that was inevitably approaching. What the Book of Enoch does with mastery is connect the dots that Genesis leaves open. Why did God send the flood? Genesis says wickedness was great. Enoch says where that wickedness came from. Why were there giants on the earth before the flood? Enoch explains their origin. What are the demons the Gospels mention so frequently? Enoch answers, they are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, condemned to wander the earth eternally after the destruction of their bodies. The second major section is the Book of Parables, and here the revelations become even more extraordinary. Enoch is transported to the heavens and contemplates the throne room of God. The text describes a throne of shimmering crystal, wheels of fire spinning without cease, countless celestial beings all around, and seated at the right hand of the Ancient of Days, a figure Enoch calls the Son of Man, the same title Jesus would use when speaking of himself. The vision of the Son of Man in Enoch is theologically stunning. The text declares that this being existed before the sun and the constellations were created, before the stars of heaven were made, that his name was spoken by the Ancient of Days before the creation of the world, that all eternal judgment was delivered into his hands. For New Testament scholars, reading Enoch is like finding the original draft of concepts Jesus used that no one else knew the source of. The connection to the New Testament is direct and documented. The Apostle Jude, author of the shortest letter in the Western Bible, quoted the Book of Enoch word for word. In verse 14 of his letter he writes, Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about them. And then he faithfully reproduces Enoch chapter 1 verse 9, a literal quotation from a text the Western Canon never included. Jude clearly considered Enoch to be sacred scripture without question. The revelation of John is filled with images that seem drawn directly from the Book of Enoch. The Ancient of Days enthroned, the celestial beings surrounding him, the angels with bowls of divine judgment, the condemnation of the rebel angels. Scholars have debated for decades whether John read Enoch. The Ethiopian Church never needed that debate. For Ethiopians, both books have always sat side by side, illuminating each other in every liturgical reading. The Book of Enoch also contains an astronomical section, the Book of the Luminaries, describing the movement of the sun, moon, and stars in terms that influence the Ethiopian calendar. Ethiopia uses to this day a calendar of 13 months, with a 13th month of 5 or 6 days called Pagum. This calendar, rooted in the traditions of Enoch and Jubilees, means that Ethiopia celebrates Christmas on the 7th of January, unlike all of Western Christendom. The complete text of the Book of Enoch survived only in Ge'ez. Fragments were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, proving it circulated widely in the Second Temple period before Christ. But the complete version, all 108 pages of the text, existed in only one place in the world until the 18th century, in the mountain monasteries of Ethiopia. No other tradition, Jewish, Catholic or Protestant, had preserved it in its entirety. When the Scottish explorer James Bruce arrived in Ethiopia in 1768, he found what European scholars had treated as mere legend, complete copies of the Book of Enoch in Ge'ez. Bruce brought 3 copies back when he returned. One was presented to King Louis XV of France and ended up in the National Library of Paris. Another went to the Bodleian Library in Oxford. The third stayed with Bruce until his death. In 1773, Europe awoke in shock. The second great text exclusive to the Ethiopian Canon is the Book of Jubilees, called Kufale in Ge'ez, meaning the divisions. It is a narrative that retells Genesis from beginning to end, but with one crucial detail: it fills the gaps. Where Genesis simply says, "And Abraham departed," Jubilees says when, why, with whom, and what happened on the journey. It is like finding the complete notes of an editor to a story you knew only in its final condensed summary. The Book of Jubilees presents itself as a revelation given to Moses himself on Mount Sinai, dictated by the Angel of the Presence, a being who dwells before the throne of God. The revelation organizes all of history from the creation to the Exodus into periods of 49 years called Jubilees. Every biblical event receives a precise date within this sacred and rigorous chronology. For the Ethiopian Church, Jubilees is not optional supplement, it is central theological foundation. One of the most fascinating elements of Jubilees is its elaborate angelology. The text speaks of 4 categories of angels: the angels of the presence, the angels of the sanctifications, the guardian angels of individuals, and the angels who govern the phenomena of nature. Every nation on earth has a designated guardian angel. Every person has one as well. This richly detailed angelic universe profoundly shaped all of Ethiopian spirituality across the centuries. Jubilees also presents an alternative version of the fall of the angels, different from the account in Enoch. According to the Ethiopian reading, the angels who sinned were descendants of Seth, the sons of God mentioned in Genesis 6, and the women they united with were daughters of Cain, descendants of the murderer. The Ethiopian text insists on this distinct reading, creating a theology of collective sin that would shape the entire subsequent sacred narrative. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in 1947 in the caves of Qumran, confirmed something of crucial importance. Fragments of the Book of Jubilees were found there, among the parchments of the Essenes. This proves that Jubilees existed before Christ, was sacred to important Jewish communities, and certainly circulated in the cultural world in which Jesus grew up and ministered. The Ethiopians kept something the rest of the world had lost. The theology of sacred time in Jubilees profoundly influenced the Ethiopian Church. The text insists that time belongs to God, that the days of feast and of fasting are not optional suggestions, but part of the fundamental structure of the created cosmos. The Ethiopian Church has one of the densest liturgical calendars in all of Christianity. More than 200 days of fasting per year, in a rhythm that, according to tradition, echoes the very celestial order described in Jubilees. The third great text exclusive to the Ethiopian Bible is the Kebra Nagast, the Glory of Kings. Compiled in its present form in the 14th century, it claims traditions far older. Divided into 117 chapters, It begins with a debate among the church fathers at Nicaea and ends with end times prophecy. But the heart of the book is a story of wisdom, of love, and of an inheritance that crossed the ocean and changed the Ethiopian world forever. The Queen of Sheba, called Makeda in the Kebra Nagast, ruled a kingdom of unimaginable riches. Hearing stories of King Solomon's wisdom in Jerusalem, she organized an expedition of 6 months' journey through the desert. She arrived with a caravan of camels loaded with gold, silver, and rare spices. But what she sought was not commerce. It was knowledge. It was the God of Israel, the deity who had made Solomon the wisest man to walk the face of the earth. Solomon and Makeda spent months in deep conversation about God, about the cosmos, about law and justice. She learned. He taught with patience. The Kebra Nagast describes lavish banquets, late-night philosophical discussions, and Makeda's gradual conversion to the God of Israel. One night, Solomon asked that she take nothing from his house without permission. She agreed, on the condition that he take nothing from her either. In the middle of the night, overcome by thirst, Makeda drank water. From this union was born Menelik, son of Solomon and Makeda, heir to 2 royal crowns. He grew up in Ethiopia as a prince. When he came of age, he journeyed to Jerusalem to meet his father. Solomon recognized him and wanted him to remain as heir to the throne of Israel. Menelik refused. His place was in Ethiopia, but on his return, according to the Kebra Nagast, something happened that Ethiopians have recounted with reverence to this very day. The text recounts that Menelik's companions, sons of the temple priests, removed the Ark of the Covenant in the night and placed an exact replica in its place. Menelik only discovered what had happened after he was already far from Jerusalem, crossing the Red Sea. But the Kebra Nagast insists this was not theft, it was divine will. An angel had permitted it. The God of Israel had chosen Ethiopia as the new home of his presence among human beings. For Ethiopians, the Kebra Nagast is not simply sacred literature. It is the spiritual birth certificate of an entire nation. It explains why Ethiopia is the only African country that successfully resisted European colonization. It explains why emperors titled themselves Lion of Judah and King of Kings, titles drawn directly from the lineage of Solomon. It explains why 50 million people celebrate Timkat as if the Exodus of Israel were their own story. The Ark, according to Ethiopian tradition guarded for centuries, rests to this day in the city of Axum, protected inside the small chapel of the tablet, adjacent to the great church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. Only one single priest in the world may enter that chapel. This priest is chosen for life. When he dies, another is chosen. He never leaves the sacred precinct. He lives, prays, and dies beside the ark. No other human being claims to have seen it directly. The 3 books of Maccabean are perhaps the texts least known from the Ethiopian Bible outside of Ethiopia itself. Loosely called the Ethiopian Maccabees, they share no relationship with the books of Maccabees in the Catholic Bible. They are entirely different texts, with their own characters, original stories, and a theology distinctly Ethiopian. No parallel to these texts exists in any other Christian or Jewish tradition anywhere else in the known world. The first Maccabean begins with a man from the tribe of Benjamin named Maccabeus. His 3 sons, Abiah, Sela, and Pantera, refuse to worship the idols of a tyrannical king and are tortured for it. Later, 2 brothers, Judah and Maccabees, lead a victorious revolt against a cruel king named Akrandis of Midian. These are stories of faith, of martyrdom, and of courage that have no parallel in any other known biblical tradition in the Christian world. What makes the second Maccabean unique in all biblical literature is the surprising inversion it performs. The enemy becomes the hero. The book begins with a king of Moab named Maccabeus. a persecutor, not a martyr. But over the course of the narrative, this king encounters the reality of the God of Israel and recognizes the emptiness of his idols. A prophet named Ray teaches him the law of God. The pagan king fully converts. No other Bible tells this story. The third Maccabean is the most philosophical of the three. It abandons the narrative of battles and takes on the tone of a meditative sermon. Using figures such as Adam, David, and Job, the text constructs a reflection on salvation, punishment, and repentance. For the Ethiopian reader, the three Maccabean together form a complete theology in the shape of story, a way of thinking about sin and grace that exists in no other text in any other Christian tradition. The Paralipomena of Jeremiah, also known as Fourth Baruch, narrate what happened to the prophet Jeremiah and his faithful secretary Baruch during and after the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians. The title means "Things Left Out of the Book of Jeremiah." The Lord reveals to Jeremiah that Jerusalem will fall, but that the sacred vestments of the temple cannot be profaned by the invaders. Jeremiah must act quickly before everything is irreversibly lost. Jeremiah obeys. Before Nebuchadnezzar enters the city, he carefully buries the priestly vestments and the sacred vessels. The city falls in flames. Jeremiah goes into exile with the deported people. Baruch remains alone among the ruins of Jerusalem, praying between the scorched stones. Then something extraordinary happens. God sends an eagle to serve as a messenger between Baruch in Jerusalem and Jeremiah in distant exile in Babylon. The most dramatic scene in the Paralipomena occurs when the divine eagle arrives carrying a letter from Baruch. At the very moment, Jeremiah is presiding over a funeral. The eagle lands on the corpse, and the dead man rises before everyone. The miracle announces the end of the long exile. The people may return home. This text, considered sacred only by the Ethiopian Church among all the Christian churches of the world, preserves a unique vision of Jeremiah's prophetic world. The expanded Book of Baruch, included in the Ethiopian Bible, preserves prophecies and laments that go well beyond what appears in Western versions. In Ethiopian tradition, Baruch is not merely Jeremiah's faithful scribe. He is himself a prophet. His texts are treated as direct revelation from God, not as a simple appendix to the master's words. Baruch risked his life so the words would be preserved, and the Ethiopians preserved the words Baruch risked his life to record. Another text preserved in the Ethiopian Bible is the Shepherd of Hermas, one of the most widely read Christian writings of the 2nd century, read in the earliest communities with the same seriousness as the apostolic letters. It consists of visions, commandments, and parables received by a man named Hermas, identified as the brother of Pius, Bishop of Rome. For 2 centuries, many Christians considered it as authoritative as the letters of Paul of Tarsus. The Shepherd of Hermas was cited as scripture by Irenaeus of Lyon, by Clement of Alexandria, and by Origen, 3 of the greatest theologians of early Christian history. It appears on the earliest New Testament lists as a borderline text, nearly inside the definitive canon. When the West decided to exclude it, Ethiopia kept its Ge'ez translation. The text that shaped Christian theology for 2 centuries survived intact, thanks to the Church of Axum, which never abandoned it. The Ethiopian Canon also includes what is called the broader canon, a set of 9 additional books that complement the 81. Among them are the Synodos, a collection of early ecclesiastical ordinances, the Book of the Covenant, and the Didaskalia, one of the earliest manuals of Christian life ever written. These texts regulated how to baptize, how to conduct oneself at the Lord's table, and how to discipline members who had sinned gravely against the community of believers. What makes the Ethiopian Bible unique is not merely the number of books, it is the criterion that guided its formation across the centuries. The 9 saints and subsequent bishops did not ask, was it approved by Rome? They asked, was this text read in the early Christian communities? Does it reveal truths about God? Does it build up the faith of the church? By these rigorous criteria, 81 books passed the test, and the Ethiopians kept every single one of them. To understand why Enoch was excluded from the Western canon, one must understand the climate of the 4th century. The bishops debating the canon at Carthage faced intense pressures. Texts that seemed too similar to pagan mythology, angels uniting with human women, giants walking the earth, were politically dangerous at a moment when Christianity urgently needed to distinguish itself from the Greco-Roman paganism that still surrounded the church on every side. The exclusion of Enoch was not a decision about its proven falsity. It was a decision of political convenience. Jerome himself, the translator of the Bible into Latin in the 4th century, knew Enoch and mentioned it in his personal writings. But the text did not enter the Vulgate. Over time, what stayed outside the Vulgate stayed outside Western knowledge. Centuries later, whatever lay beyond that reach began to automatically appear suspicious by its very nature. The Ethiopians never had that problem of perception. For them, Enoch and Jubilees were not suspicious texts. They were ancestors, texts their forebears in the faith had read and copied across generations. The Ethiopian question was never, should we include Enoch? It would be, why would anyone in good faith exclude Enoch? The perspective is completely inverted. And when you invert it, what seems strange about the Ethiopian Bible reveals the West to seem incomplete. The first Book of Enoch has a structure that reveals its complexity. The Book of the Watchers, the Book of Parables, the Astronomical Book, the Book of Dreams, and the Epistle of Enoch. Each section was likely written in a different period, assembled over the centuries before Christ. In Ethiopia, the work is treated as a sacred and coherent whole, the progressive revelation of Enoch, the 7th from Adam, throughout his singular walk with God. The Book of Dreams in Enoch is particularly fascinating. In it, the patriarch receives 2 great prophetic visions before the flood. The second, known as the Animal Apocalypse, narrates the entire history of Israel through symbolic fable. The patriarchs are white bulls, the Egyptians are wolves, the angels are men in white robes. The story moves from the Exodus through to the Messianic age, a coded prophecy embedded inside another, far grander story. The Epistle of Enoch, the 5th and final section, contains some of the most powerful attacks on social injustice ever written in ancient religious literature. Woe to the rich who accumulate wealth upon the earth, the text proclaims with the voice of thunder, for there is no mercy for you. It is a prophetic voice that resonates with the Old Testament prophets and anticipates the preaching of John the Baptist and of Jesus himself. Ethiopians read these words as scripture for 2 millennia. Jubilees deserves special attention for its theology of sacred time. The book insists that God created time with a precise structure, and that disobeying the sacred calendar is a form of apostasy. This conviction shaped the Ethiopian Church in a radical way. No other Christian denomination in the entire world fasts as much as the Ethiopian Church. With more than 200 days of fasting per year, obedience to sacred time is the very spine of Ethiopian spirituality. The Kebra Nagast, across its 117 chapters, goes far beyond Menelik and the Ark. It includes revelations about angels, debates on the nature of Christ that anticipate the councils, prophecies about the end of time, and visions of Judgment Day. For the Ethiopian Church, the Kebra Nagast is simultaneously national history, systematic theology, and first-rate apocalyptic literature. It is unique in all of Christian history. No other text resembles it. The identification of Ethiopia with Israel is one of the central themes of the Kebra Nagast. The text argues that God's covenant was extended to Ethiopia through the royal lineage of Menelik, that Ethiopians are the legitimate spiritual heirs of the promise made to Abraham. This is not seen as replacing Jewish Israel. It is seen as the generous extension of divine grace to a new nation, preparing the way for the arrival of the promised Christ since the very beginning of creation. Another revealing dimension of the Ethiopian exclusive books is their extraordinary narrative richness. While Western texts frequently skip over events and leave characters unnamed, the Ethiopian texts fill those gaps with vivid stories. We know the names of the angels who served God. We know what happened to Baruch after the fall of Jerusalem. We know the name of Menelik's mother and how she felt watching her son depart to meet his royal father across the sea. The richness of the Ethiopian texts is not a late invention of medieval writers. The Qumran fragments, the Dead Sea Scrolls, include portions of Enoch, Jubilees, and other texts that circulated in the pre-Christian Jewish world. This means the traditions preserved by the Ethiopians are a central part of the spiritual universe in which Jesus, Paul, and all the apostles grew up and taught. The Ethiopian Bible touches the same sacred soil as the New Testament. The final criterion for understanding the Ethiopian Bible is simple. It was formed by a church that never accepted that others, from far away, would decide what it should read. The Church of Axum received the Gospel in the 4th century before Rome adopted it as a state religion. It received manuscripts from the 9 saints in the 5th. It survived invasions, isolation, and oblivion, and it emerged with 81 books completely intact. That is not accident, that is faithfulness. In a monastery in the mountains of Tigray, in northern Ethiopia, kept in a room with small windows and armed sentinels, lie the oldest illustrated Christian manuscripts to survive anywhere in the world. They are called the Garima Gospels, named in honor of Abba Garima, one of the 9 saints who, according to tradition, produced them with his own hands in the 5th century. Science, however, went even further than tradition had imagined possible. The radiocarbon dating of the Garima Gospels revealed something stunning to the academic world. The manuscript, known as Garima II, dates to approximately 390 to 570 after Christ. The other, Garima I, is slightly more recent. They are therefore the oldest surviving illustrated Christian manuscripts anywhere in the world. No European library and no Vatican museum holds anything that comes even remotely close to this. The Garima Gospels are written in Ge'ez on goatskin parchment. Garima II has 322 pages with 17 fully illuminated pages, portraits of the evangelists and of Eusebius of Caesarea. The artwork displays characteristics of late Byzantine style, with influences from Coptic Egypt, Nubia, and Yemen. It is testimony to the extraordinary cultural connections of Axum with the ancient world at its height. The style is unique and has never been reproduced. The cover of Garima I may be the oldest binding still attached to its original book anywhere in the world. It is of gilded copper, likely contemporary with the manuscript, meaning it has accompanied the book for between 400 and 500 years. The cover of Garima II is of silver and dates from the 10th to 12th centuries. Both manuscripts underwent scientific conservation funded by the British Ethiopian Heritage Fund in the early 21st century. How did these manuscripts survive 15 centuries intact? A combination of unwavering devotion, providential geography, and, the monks would say, explicit divine protection. During the centuries when northern Ethiopia was occupied by enemy forces, from the 9th to the 14th century, the monks of Abba Garima hid the manuscripts in caves on the rocky slopes. When the threat passed, the texts were unearthed. The memory of where they lay was never lost. The monastery of Abba Garima lies in the mountains of Adwa, the same region where in 1896 the Ethiopian army defeated the Italians at the Battle of Adwa, becoming the first African people to defeat a European colonial army in open battle. There is something persistent in these mountains, something that resists, that guards, that does not bow to whatever comes from outside claiming power. The manuscripts are the oldest and most eloquent example of that. On Lake Tana, the islands keep their secrets with the same silence they have maintained for centuries. The 19 monasteries of the lake have never been fully inventoried by outside scholars. Some are open to selected visitors, but others remain hermetically closed, their manuscripts waiting patiently for scholars who may never arrive. The lake, with its hippopotamuses and dark waters, is a more effective guardian than any stone wall could ever be. The monastery of Tana, Kirkos, guards traditions, claiming that the Ark of the Covenant itself rested there for 800 years before being brought to Aksum by Menelik. The monastery also claims to guard one of the original veils of the temple and other objects of ancient Hebrew worship. Outside, scholars have never been able to verify these claims with precision. The islands keep their own mysteries, and the monks feel no obligation to resolve them for the outside world. Debre Damo is the most difficult monastery to reach in all of Ethiopia. Built in the 6th century atop a cliff of 15 meters of sheer, smooth rock, the only way up is to climb a leather rope with the help of a monk pulling from above. Women can never enter. Not even female animals are permitted within the precinct. Only men, and the precious texts they guard with their very lives and with the entire soul of each passing generation. At Debre Damo, the monks do not merely keep manuscripts, they actively produce them. They copy, they translate, they illuminate with golden ink. The living tradition of manuscript production continues without interruption. Young monks sit in silence around wooden boards, reed pens dipped in ink made from local roots and minerals, tracing Ge'ez characters with precision onto animal hide parchment. It is the exact same process the 9 saints used 15 centuries ago. James Bruce was a wealthy, adventurous, and extraordinarily curious Scotsman. In June of 1768, he arrived in Alexandria with a stated goal: to discover the source of the Nile. But what he found in Ethiopia during 2 years of residence was more impressive than any river. An intact library of texts that Europe had declared lost or non-existent. Bruce learned Ge'ez, copied manuscripts, and made friends among the monks of the mountains. When he left Ethiopia, Bruce took with him 3 complete copies of the Book of Enoch, the text European scholars knew only through fragmentary quotations in other writings, but which had never physically reached any Western university. In 1773, he returned to Europe with these parchments. The world of biblical studies would never be the same. What Ethiopia had kept for centuries was about to change everything the scholarly world thought it knew. Europe's reaction to Bruce's return was one of biting skepticism. The experts refused to believe he had found the complete Book of Enoch. They accused him of lying and of fantastical exaggeration. Bruce was deeply offended. He died in 1794 without seeing his discovery recognized in his lifetime. But when his copies were finally translated and published, scholars acknowledged with astonishment it was genuine, and it had been in Ethiopia the whole time. The English translation of the Book of Enoch, made by Richard Lawrence and published in 1821, opened a new era in biblical studies. For the first time, theologians could read the text the Apostle Jude had quoted word for word. What they discovered was unsettling in its depth. The angelological universe of Enoch provided the context for New Testament passages that had seemed obscure without it. The entire Bible became more coherent, not less. There are passages in the New Testament that only make full sense in light of Ethiopian texts. The letter of Peter that mentions the angels who sinned and were cast into Tartarus. a direct reference to the Book of Enoch, the letter of Jude that names Enoch by name as a prophet, the visions of Revelation with the Ancient of Days and the angelic hosts, all echoes of images Enoch described in detail 2 centuries before Christ was born in Bethlehem. On the 19th of January each year, or the 20th in leap years, Ethiopia celebrates Timkat, the Epiphany, commemorating the baptism of Jesus in the Jordan River. It is one of the most visually magnificent religious celebrations on the planet. But what most strikes first-time witnesses is not merely the beauty of the golden vestments, it is the shock of recognizing Old Testament rites being practiced by Christians of the 21st century. On the eve of Timkat, called Ketera, the tablet is removed from every church in the country. The tablet is a sacred tablet, a replica of the tablets of the law that represents the Ark of the Covenant. Every Ethiopian church has its own tablet, kept in the Holy of Holies, the most sacred space which only ordained priests may touch. On Ketera, the tablet is wrapped in precious silks and carried on the priest's head in solemn procession through the city streets. The Timkat procession is accompanied by drums, sistrums, and liturgical chanting in Ge'ez, a language the common Ethiopian people no longer speak, but recognize as the sacred language of God since childhood. The faithful wear white robes. The streets are adorned with flowers and colored fabrics. People reach out to touch the silk-covered tableau as it passes, as if touching the divine presence itself. It is a rite that echoes the ark processions described in the books of Samuel. On the morning of Timkat, the priest blesses a fountain or river with the tablet present. The faithful immerse themselves in the blessed waters, renewing the baptism they received in infancy. Some spend the entire night outdoors, singing around the tablet by torchlight. There is a living continuity between this rite and what David did when the ark arrived in Jerusalem. He danced before it in ecstatic public joy. Ethiopians do not imitate the Old Testament. They continue living inside it. In Aksum, Timkat takes on even more extraordinary dimensions. Pilgrims from across Ethiopia climb the ancient mountains to be present in the city, where, according to tradition, the true original Ark of Moses rests. The procession passes by the Cathedral of Our Lady Mary of Zion, beside which stands the small white chapel where no one but the guardian may enter. No camera has ever photographed its interior. No journalist has ever crossed that sacred threshold. The guardian of the Ark in Aksum is a priest chosen by the Archbishop for life, with no possibility of returning to the outside world. When he assumes the role, he can never again leave the chapel precinct. He sleeps, eats, and prays beside what Ethiopians claim is the original Ark of Moses. When scholars attempt to negotiate access, the answer is always the same. The Ark does not need the world's approval to exist. It has existed for 3,000 years. Ethiopian monks continue copying manuscripts in the mountain monasteries, not as an archaeological exercise in preservation, but as a daily act of living faith. A young monk of 20 learns to prepare the parchment, to produce ink from local ingredients, to trace Ge'ez characters with precision. His masters learned from their masters in an unbroken line reaching back to the 9 saints of the 5th century. The chain has never been broken by any force. The Western world formally learned of the Garima Gospels only in the early 21st century, when the Ethiopian Heritage Fund financed their conservation and dating. For 15 centuries, these manuscripts existed without any European university cataloging them, without any museum claiming them. They were simply there, as they had always been, guarded by men who never doubted for a single moment their eternal and incalculable worth. What does all of this mean for the Christian of today? First, it means that the Christian faith is richer and broader than any single denomination can contain alone. The Ethiopian Church does not challenge what the Western Christian believes. It expands it. It says, there is more. There is depth you have not yet explored. There are voices that spoke of Christ centuries before Christ was born, voices the Ethiopians never stopped hearing with reverence and genuine devotion. More than 50 million Christians read these 81 books every Sunday, not as academic curiosity, as the living, active Word of God. They are not theologians debating the Canon in universities. They are simple women in mountain villages who know the Book of Enoch by heart because they heard it sung every week since birth. The Ethiopian tradition is alive, embodied, and deeply everyday. It is not abstract theory. It is faith lived in flesh and bone. The Ethiopian faith is not more primitive than the Western faith. It is more ancient. When Protestant reformers of the 16th century debated which books should be in the Bible, the Ethiopian Church had settled that question more than 1,000 years before. While Catholics and Protestants waged war across Europe, Ethiopian monks quietly copied in silence texts both sides of the conflict had long since forgotten. Antiquity is not weakness. It is a form of deep spiritual authority. The deepest lesson of the Ethiopian Church is a lesson in radical faithfulness. Across 17 centuries, this church faced Islamic invasion, geographic isolation, European colonial contempt, and violent persecution by a communist regime in the 20th century, and never abandoned its texts. Manuscripts were hidden in caves, carried on muleback along mountain trails, copied by candlelight through nights of siege. The word was always kept. Always. Each Christian tradition preserved something the others lost along the way. Catholics preserved episcopal authority and the 7 sacraments. Protestants preserved the centrality of Scripture and the universal priesthood of believers. The Greek Orthodox preserved liturgy and Trinitarian theology. And the Ethiopians preserved the texts, the books the others discarded for political convenience, for cultural pressure, or for fear of what they did not understand. The Bible is larger than any single canon can contain, not because it is undefined, but because the act of recording divine revelation in human words always produced more than any committee could systematize. The texts the Ethiopians guard do not contradict the faith, they deepen it. They do not challenge Christ, they precede and illuminate him. They reveal that God was at work in dimensions the councils of the 4th century could barely imagine or comprehend. There is something profoundly moving about the image of an 80-year-old Ethiopian monk copying the Book of Enoch by hand. He does not know that James Bruce carried that text to Europe. He does not know that Western theologians debate its authenticity. He only knows that this text is sacred, that his master said it was sacred, and that his master's master said the same. The unbroken chain of faithfulness, generation after generation, is the most eloquent proof of all. The Ethiopian Church has more than 50 million active faithful. It is one of the largest Christian denominations in the world. It has grown in the last 50 years at a rate that defies the statistics of decline in Western Christianity. Perhaps it is no coincidence. Perhaps there is something in the 81 books that nourishes faith in a way 66 cannot manage alone. Not because the others are wrong, but because altogether they are more complete. The city of Axum remains the spiritual heart of Ethiopia. Its 2,000-year-old stone obelisks still rise against the blue sky of African mornings. The Cathedral of Our Lady Mary of Zion, rebuilt many times but always on the same sacred ground, receives pilgrims from across Ethiopia. And beside the cathedral, the small white chapel where no one but the guardian may enter, where something waits, as it has for millennia, silent, kept, present. The world is rediscovering the texts Ethiopia never lost. Universities translate Enoch into dozens of languages. Researchers debate the Kebra Nagast with growing interest across the globe. Young Christians seek the Book of Jubilees with a hunger for spiritual depth. But for 50 million Ethiopians, this is not rediscovery. It is simple continuity. It is what it has always been. What is worth keeping deserves to be kept forever, generation after generation. You came this far because you sensed there was more beyond what you knew, that the faith you professed was real, but perhaps incomplete in its perspective. That somewhere in history there were testimonies that were not erased. You were right. The oldest church in the world kept them for 17 centuries so that future generations could find them. The Bible of 81 books is not an alternative to your faith. It is an invitation to go deeper into it. If this video opened a door you did not know existed, share it with someone who is also searching with honesty. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey through the texts and stories the first Christians knew, and that the world almost let fall into oblivion. Every week, a new dive into the depths of faith, because the story of God is vaster than any human version has been able to keep alone, and together we can explore what remains.